Faith for Today with Colin Urquhart and Julia Fisher.
We are closely following the story of Jesus as told through John's Gospel, and yesterday we found Jesus being arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, and obviously things were totally under his control. You made that point very strongly. He gave up his life when he was ready to, and we find him being taken now to be interrogated by Caiaphas, the high priest.
Yes, he's first of all was interrogated by Annas, who is also called high priest because he had been high priest. But Caiaphas was high priest that year. And so then Annas sent him to Caiaphas. We don't have any detail in John's Gospel of what happened before Caiaphas, but Caiaphas then sends him to Pilate. Now, Pilate, of course, was the Roman authority in the city, in the nation. And so he is the only one who had the authority to execute. And we'll read through the events that took place before Pilate, because this is really of very crucial importance for us to understand what is going on in this build-up to the crucifixion, what the real issues were. Now, we saw at the end yesterday that the Jewish leaders did not want to go into the Gentiles' palace because that would have made them ceremoniously unclean and they wouldn't have been able to eat the Passover. So Pilate comes out to speak to them, and he says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Now, they avoid the question at first, and they say in verse 30, "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." So Pilate says, "Well, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews object to this, but we have no right to execute anyone. So you see, what they were really after clearly is simply to kill Jesus, or to have Jesus killed. They wanted him executed. They wanted his ministry ended because he was too much of a threat to them and to their religious position. And then we read in verse 32, "This happened so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled, because, of course, the manner of execution by the Roman occupying forces was crucifixion." Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now, this clearly was therefore the charge that the Jewish authorities were putting before Pilate. This man is claiming to be the king of the Jews. Now, they're trying to make it a political thing, you see, because, of course, the Romans were the occupying force, and there couldn't be any king or any other authority unless they were appointed by Rome. Herod was very much a vassal of Rome. So, are you the king of the Jews? Have you set yourself up as a king? That is the issue. So Jesus says, "Is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" So they're trying to use a political route to get their will of having Jesus crucified. But Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Now, he doesn't say he's not a king. He says, "But I have a kingdom, but it's not a worldly kingdom." In other words, it's no threat to Rome and to the Roman occupying forces. If it were of this world, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place. "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Then we have this famous question that Pilate asks, what is truth? I don't know that he was trying to be very profound at the time. I think he was probably saying, well, who on earth is going to know the truth? You claim to be a king from above, a king from another place. I mean, what is the truth? Who can ever know the truth? With this he went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." In other words, he is no threat to Rome. He's not claiming an earthly kingdom. "But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" I suppose Pilate is thinking, well, now, if this guy is a king, they would want him released. This would be an easy way out of his dilemma, because he's obviously getting very nervous about the situation. They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion. He was a threat to the political stability of the region. He was a threat to Rome. So Pilate is now in this invidious position of being asked to execute Jesus, who is no threat to Rome, and release Barabbas, who was a threat to Rome. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him in the face. So this was real mockery of the very worst kind. You claim to be a king, all right, we'll treat you as a king. Hail, King of the Jews! Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews, "Look, I am bringing him out to you, to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." John is missing out quite a lot of the detail that we find in the other Gospels. He's just focusing, you see, on what actually is going to happen to Jesus. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." Obviously, they've got rent-a-crowd here. And, everybody is under orders as to what they're to do and how they're to shout for Jesus to be crucified. But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." In other words, Pilate knows that he is innocent. Pilate is well aware that these men have simply delivered him up out of jealousy. So the Jews insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. In other words, he wants some way to release Jesus. He really does. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given you from above. Therefore the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." Interesting, because Jesus, I think, is trying to help Pilate here. He's saying, well, you have power over me because God has given you that power. And I've placed myself in a position where I'm now under that power. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." Now, this is hypocrisy of the highest degree. because, of course, these Jewish leaders totally resented the Roman occupation. All they wanted was just to live a quiet life and to have their religious authority and to get on with their religious practices. But to now accuse the Roman official of opposing Caesar when they in their own hearts were opposed to Caesar was the height of hypocrisy. But it puts Pilate in an invidious position, because word must never get back to Rome that Pilate was opposing Caesar. So when Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews, but they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Oh, wow! That is blasphemy. They're accusing Jesus of blasphemy, but that's like saying, God is not our king. The only king we have is Caesar. I mean, this is really serious stuff. These Jewish leaders are denying the very thing in which they're supposed to believe.
You've been listening to Faith for Today, presented by Julia Fisher. This program is sponsored by Kingdom Faith. For further information, visit our website, kingdomfaith.com.